The unexpected guests, the Grand Assembly Hall of the Galactic Concordance, floated in perfect silence among the stars. For 3,000 years, this crystalline structure had hosted diplomatic gatherings between the civilized species of the galaxy. Its walls were transparent, offering a view of the cosmos that reminded all who entered of their insignificance and their potential. Today, those walls would witness something unprecedented. Ambassador Velron of the Corvathi Empire stood at the central podium, his forearms folded in the traditional gesture of peaceful waiting. His silver skin reflected the starlight, creating patterns that his species used to communicate subtle emotions. Right now, those patterns showed careful optimism mixed with underlying concern. Around him, representatives from 47 different species occupied their designated platforms, each designed to accommodate their unique physiologies. The insectoid churix hung from silk threads above their station. The aquatic delphons floated in their gravity-contained water spheres. The energy-based luminae pulsed with soft bioluminescence in their containment fields. They were all waiting for humanity. The newcomers, the species that had exploded onto the galactic stage just 5 years ago and immediately started a war that had claimed millions of lives across a dozen star systems. The war had finally reached a stalemate, and both sides had agreed to meet here, in neutral space, to discuss terms for peace. Velron had spent months preparing for this moment. He had studied every scrap of information available about humans. He knew they came from a world they called Earth, a planet located in what the Concordance had classified as a hazardous zone due to its unstable star and dangerous celestial neighborhood. He knew they had only achieved faster-than-light travel 40 years ago, making them one of the youngest spacefaring species in recorded history. He knew they were aggressive, unpredictable, and apparently incapable of following established diplomatic protocols. What he did not know was why they were 3 hours late. Counselor Velron, the voice of his aide, whispered through his communication implant. "We are detecting gravitational distortions. Multiple vessels approaching. They are not using standard approach vectors." Velron felt his skin patterns shift to show alertness. "How many vessels?" The aide paused. 17. "Counselor, they are large." "Very large." The assembly hall fell silent as every species present received similar reports from their own monitoring systems. 17 ships. For a peace summit, most species sent a single diplomatic yacht with minimal crew. The Corvathi themselves had arrived in a small cruiser carrying only Velron and his essential staff of 12. The first human ship dropped out of hyperspace with none of the gentle precision that marked civilized space travel. It simply appeared, its exit from faster-than-light creating a visible ripple in spacetime that made several species physically recoil. The ship was enormous, easily 3 kilometers long, and it looked nothing like any diplomatic vessel Velron had ever seen. It was industrial. There was no other word for it. The hull was a patchwork of different metals, clearly constructed from whatever materials had been available. Massive engines dominated the rear section, far larger than necessary for a ship of that size. The front section bristled with what appeared to be sensor arrays, communication dishes, and other equipment bolted onto the exterior with apparent randomness. It looked like something built in a hurry by people who cared more about function than form. Then the other 16 ships arrived. They were smaller than the first, but each one was just as industrial, just as crude, just as obviously designed for purposes other than diplomacy. Several showed visible damage, patched hull sections, and scorch marks that suggested recent combat. By the eternal light breathed Counselor Thissa of the Delphins, her translated voice rippling through her water sphere. They brought a fleet to a peace summit. They brought a construction convoy. Velron corrected quietly, though his skin patterns now showed deep confusion. Those are not warships. They are cargo haulers, colony transports, mining vessels. I see at least 3 different ship classes from 3 different manufacturers. It is as if they simply gathered whatever ships they had available and brought them all. The human vessels did not arrange themselves in any recognizable formation. They simply stopped in space near the assembly hall, maintaining distances that seemed random to Velrun's trained eye. There was no symmetry, no aesthetic consideration, no apparent tactical positioning. They just stopped, hanging in space like rocks thrown into a pond. Ambassador Velrun received the standard docking request from the lead human ship. The message was brief, almost curt. Human delegation requesting permission to dock. 17 personnel. He granted permission, wondering what was about to happen. The humans did not send a small shuttle to the assembly hall's elegant docking ports. Instead, 6 humans flew across the space between their ships and the hall using individual thruster packs. They moved with surprising grace, their bulky suits somehow not hindering their coordination. Velrun watched through the observation screens as they approached the docking bay. When the first human removed her helmet, Velrun got his first look at their species. She was shorter than he had expected, perhaps 1.6 meters tall. Her skin was a shade of brown that reminded him of certain tree barks from his homeworld. Her hair was black and cut short, practical rather than decorative. Her eyes were dark and constantly moving, taking in every detail of the docking bay with an intensity that made Velrun uncomfortable. She wore a uniform of dark blue fabric with patches and insignias that presumably indicated rank and affiliation. The clothing looked durable, designed for extended wear rather than formal occasions. The other 5 humans were similarly dressed, though Velrun noted variations in their physical appearances. Different skin tones, different facial structures, different body proportions. They moved as a unit, maintaining a loose formation that allowed each of them clear lines of sight to different sections of the bay. They were scanning for threats, Velrun realized. Even here, in the most secure diplomatic facility in the galaxy, they were treating this as a potentially hostile environment. "Greetings," Velrun said, activating the translation matrix. "I am Ambassador Velrun of the Kovathi Empire, speaking on behalf of the Galactic Concordance. Welcome to the Grand Assembly Hall. We are honored by your presence." The lead human looked at him for a long moment. Then she smiled, and Velrun was struck by how the expression did not seem entirely friendly. "Captain Elena Vasquez, United Earth Space Authority," she said. "That's quite a title you have there, Ambassador. We appreciate the welcome. Sorry we're late. We had to make a few stops on the way." "Stops?" "Yes, we needed to pick up some supplies. Food, mainly. And we wanted to bring our full delegation, so we had to gather everyone from different locations. Your message said to bring whoever we needed for the negotiations, so we did." She gestured, and Velrun saw more humans emerging from the docking tube. They kept coming, and coming. By the time they finished, 63 humans stood in the docking bay. 63. For a delegation that was supposed to number 17. "Captain Vasquez," Velrun said carefully, his skin patterns now showing definite alarm. "Our invitation specified a delegation of no more than 20 individuals. The assembly hall has accommodations for—" "Yeah, we got that," Vasquez interrupted. 17 are our official delegates. The rest are support staff, security, technical advisors, and observers. They will not be participating in the formal negotiations, but they need to be present." "It is not negotiable. Security?" Velrun felt something cold settle in his chest. "Captain, you must understand, the assembly hall is absolutely secure. We have sophisticated defense systems, multiple redundancies, and 3,000 years of—" Captain Vasquez held up one hand. "Ambassador, with respect, we do not know you. We do not know your security systems. We do not know if we can trust them. What we do know is that we have been at war for 2 years with an enemy that has more ships, more weapons, and more resources than we do. We have survived by being careful, by never assuming we are safe, by always having backup plans. Our security team stays, or we leave. The silence that followed was profound. Velrun looked at the humans standing before him. They were not arranged in neat lines or formal groupings. They simply stood there, relaxed but alert, their eyes constantly moving, their body language suggesting readiness for immediate action. They had come to a peace summit expecting trouble. Finally, Velrun made a decision. Very well. Your security personnel may remain in the peripheral areas of the assembly hall. However, they cannot be armed during the formal sessions. Vasquez looked at the 5 humans standing closest to her. They had a brief conversation in their own language, too quick and quiet for the translation matrix to process clearly. Then Vasquez turned back to Velrun. Agreed. They will not carry obvious weapons during the formal sessions. Velrun decided not to examine the word obvious too closely. Asterisk. The humans followed Velrun through the corridors of the assembly hall. He noticed how they reacted to everything they saw. They examined the walls, the ceilings, the floors. They noted every doorway, every intersection, every viewport. They were mapping the facility in real time, storing every detail. When they passed other delegates in the corridors, the humans stared openly. They showed no embarrassment at their curiosity, no pretense of diplomatic restraint. They simply looked at every alien species they encountered with frank, undisguised interest. Some of the other delegates found this behavior rude. Velrun found it disturbing because the humans were not just curious. They were assessing. Every species they saw, they were evaluating. Threat potential, physical capabilities, possible advantages or disadvantages in conflict. The Grand Assembly Chamber was designed to inspire awe. The transparent walls showed the cosmos in all directions. The platforms for each delegation were arranged in a perfect circle, symbolizing equality and unity. Soft bioluminescence provided gentle lighting that worked for all known visual spectrums. It was beautiful, peaceful, a monument to civilization itself. The humans walked in and immediately started pointing at things and having rapid conversations. Velrun caught fragments through the translation matrix. Structural weaknesses, emergency exits, life support systems, defensive positions. They were not admiring the beauty of the chamber. They were analyzing it as a potential battlefield. Captain Vasquez finally approached the platform designated for the human delegation. It was a standard circular platform, 3 meters in diameter, with a holographic interface for presentations and a translation relay. Vasquez looked at it, then looked at her people. "We are going to need more space," she said. Velrun felt his skin patterns shift rapidly through several colors. "More space? Captain, that platform is the standard size for delegations of up to 20 individuals. It should be more than adequate." Vasquez smiled that not quite friendly smile again. "Ambassador, we have 17 official delegates. We also need space for our technical equipment, our data storage units, our communication relays, and our food supplies." "Food supplies?" Velrun repeated weakly. "Yes, we brought our own food. We did not know if your facilities could provide nutrition compatible with human biology, and we could not risk making our delegates sick during crucial negotiations. Also, some of our people have specific dietary requirements or preferences. It was simpler to bring everything we needed." Velrun looked past Vasquez and saw humans carrying large containers into the assembly chamber. They were not small containers. They were industrial-sized storage units, the kind used for long-duration space missions. "How much food did you bring?" Vasquez considered. "Enough for 63 people for 30 days, plus emergency reserves for another 15 days. We did not know how long these negotiations would take, so we prepared for extended duration. 30 days? Valrin felt dizzy. Captain Vasquez, most peace summits conclude within 3 to 5 days. We have facilities for delegations to stay if needed, but 30 days is. We like to be prepared, Vasquez said simply. It is a human trait. We hope for the best, but plan for the worst. Other delegates were beginning to arrive in the assembly chamber, and Valrin saw their reactions to the human presence. Shock, confusion, in some cases, barely concealed alarm. The humans had effectively turned their designated platform into a small fortress. They had arranged their equipment to create clear sight lines and defensive positions. They had set up communication gear that was likely monitoring everything happening in the chamber. They had even established what appeared to be a small food preparation area. The Churix delegate, Ambassador Xric, approached Valrin with agitated movements of her multiple limbs. "This is unacceptable," she clicked, her voice harsh even through translation. "The humans are treating this sacred space like a military encampment. They show no respect for our traditions, our protocols, our customs." Valrin did not have a good response. He was saved by the arrival of the human delegation's leader. Commander Richard Torres was a large man, easily 2 meters tall with broad shoulders and a presence that seemed to fill more space than his physical body occupied. His skin was darker than Vasquez's, his hair was gray at the temples, and his eyes were a startling shade of blue. He wore the same uniform as the others, but his bore more insignias, more decorations, more evidence of rank and experience. When he smiled at the assembled delegates, it was warm and genuine. "Distinguished members of the Galactic Concordance," he said, his voice deep and carrying easily through the chamber. "I am Commander Richard Torres of the United Earth Space Authority. On behalf of humanity, I want to thank you for agreeing to this summit. We know the past 2 years have been difficult for all of us. We have all lost people we cared about. We have all made sacrifices. But we are here now, and that gives me hope that we can find a better path forward. It was a good speech. Diplomatic, conciliatory, exactly what should be said at the opening of peace negotiations. But Valrin noticed that while Torres was speaking, the other humans were still working. They were still setting up equipment, still scanning the room, still preparing for something that Torres's words suggested would not happen. The contradiction was unsettling. Ambassador Valrin stood to respond. "Commander Torres, we welcome humanity to this assembly. We share your hope for peace and look forward to productive negotiations. Perhaps we should begin with..." Before he could finish, one of the human technicians shouted something in their language. The humans all reacted instantly. They moved in perfect coordination, creating a defensive formation around their platform. Several pulled out devices that were definitely weapons, despite the earlier agreement. Others activated equipment that created some kind of energy field around their position. The assembly chamber erupted into chaos. Delegates from multiple species activated their own defensive measures. Alarms began sounding. Valrin felt his heart racing as he tried to understand what was happening. Then Captain Vasquez's voice cut through the confusion. "Stand down." She was looking at her own people, her hand raised. "Everyone stand down." False alarm. The humans relaxed slightly, but did not fully lower their guard. Vasquez walked to the edge of their platform and addressed the shocked assembly. "Our apologies. Our sensor array detected what appeared to be a weapons signature. It was actually the Luminae delegate's natural energy emissions, which our systems were not properly calibrated to recognize. We have corrected the error. It will not happen again." The Luminae delegate, a being of pure energy contained in a sophisticated field matrix, pulsed with colors that the translation matrix rendered as extreme offense. "You brought weapons to a peace summit and nearly attacked me because you're primitive. Technology could not distinguish between life and danger? Torres stepped forward. Ambassador, again, our sincere apologies. But yes, we brought weapons. We brought them because we have learned, through hard experience, that being unprepared is the fastest way to die. We do not trust easily. We cannot afford to. Every human in this room has lost friends, family members, people they loved in this war. They are here because they want peace, but they will not risk their lives on the assumption that everyone else wants the same thing. The silence that followed was different from before. It was not the silence of shock or confusion. It was the silence of dawning realization. These humans, these young, aggressive newcomers to galactic society, had not come to this summit as supplicants seeking mercy. They had come as survivors who had learned to trust nothing and no one. They had come prepared for betrayal, for violence, for the possibility that this entire summit was a trap. And they had come anyway, because despite everything they had experienced, despite all their caution and preparation and weapons, they were still willing to hope for something better. Valoran looked at the human delegation, really looked at them for the first time, and felt something shift in his understanding. Perhaps the question was not why humanity had come to a peace, summit armed and ready for war. Perhaps the question was what had happened to them that made such preparation seem necessary. And perhaps, just perhaps, the galaxy needed to hear that story before any real peace could be achieved. The formal negotiations were about to begin, but Valoran suspected they would be unlike any negotiation in the 3,000-year history of the Galactic Concordance. Asterisk. The truth about humanity, the Grand Assembly Chamber, had finally settled into an uneasy calm. The human delegation remained on their fortified platform, surrounded by equipment that no other species had thought necessary to bring. The other delegates occupied their traditional positions, but Valoran noticed that many had quietly activated their own defensive measures. The humans had made everyone nervous, and that nervousness was spreading like a virus through the chamber. Commander, Torres stood at the center of the human platform, his hands clasped behind his back, in a posture that somehow managed to look both relaxed and ready for immediate action. Around him, his team had arranged themselves in what Valoran now recognized as a protective formation. They were not hiding this fact. They were making it obvious, as if daring anyone to question their right to self-preservation. Let us begin, Valoran said, attempting to restore some semblance of normal diplomatic procedure. The Galactic Concordance has prepared a framework for peace negotiations. We have analyzed the territorial disputes, the resource conflicts, and the various incidents that led to the current hostilities. Our proposal seeks to address these issues in a manner that respects the sovereignty and security of all parties involved. He activated the holographic display at the center of the chamber. A three-dimensional map of the contested region appeared, floating in the air for all to see. The map showed star systems marked in different colors, indicating ownership and disputed territories. It was clean, organized, rational. It reduced 2 years of warfare to a simple problem of boundary lines and resource allocation. Torres studied the map for a long moment. Then he looked at Valoran with an expression that was difficult to read. Ambassador, before we discuss boundaries and resources, I think we need to discuss something more fundamental. We need to talk about why this war started in the first place. Valoran felt his skin patterns shift to show polite confusion. Commander, the causes of the conflict are well documented. Human expansion into systems claimed by Concordance members, resource extraction operations in disputed territories, the incident at Proxima Station. Torres held up one hand. Yes, those are the events that triggered the war. But they are not why it happened. The why goes deeper than territorial disputes or resource conflicts. The why is about trust, or rather, the complete absence of it. He walked to the edge of the human platform, and Valoran noticed that 2 of his security personnel moved with him, maintaining their protective positions. Do you know what happened the first time humanity encountered another intelligent species? Torres asked. It was 63 years ago. We had just developed our first crewed, faster-than-light drive. We sent a small exploration vessel, the Endeavour, to a nearby star system. Just a science mission, 12 crew members, mostly researchers and engineers. They were excited, hopeful, ready to make friends with the universe. Torres activated his own holographic display, and suddenly the chamber was looking at a human spacecraft. It was tiny compared to the vessels currently orbiting outside, barely larger than a small shuttle. Its design was primitive, with exposed components and what looked like experimental technology held together with determination and optimism. They found a civilization in the third system they explored, Torres continued. The Zeloth Empire, a species that had been spacefaring for 3,000 years. That had technology beyond anything we could imagine, that seemed friendly and welcoming. The Zeloth invited the Endeavour crew to visit their home world. They offered to share knowledge, to help humanity join the galactic community, to be our guides and mentors. The holographic image changed, showing what appeared to be a beautiful city on an alien world. Elegant architecture, advanced technology, a civilization that seemed peaceful and prosperous. The Endeavour crew accepted the invitation. How could they not? This was everything humanity had dreamed of. We were not alone in the universe, and the beings we had found were willing to be our friends. Velrin felt something cold forming in his chest. He had studied human history, but this particular incident was not in any of the Concordance's files. Torres's expression had not changed, but there was something in his eyes now, something hard and old and painful. The Zeloth dissected all 12 crew members while they were still alive. Torres's voice remained calm, matter of fact, as if he were discussing routine maintenance procedures rather than atrocity. They wanted to understand human biology. They were particularly interested in our neural structures, our capacity for problem-solving, our creativity. They spent 3 weeks studying the Endeavour crew, keeping them conscious for most of it, because they wanted to observe how human brain activity changed under extreme stress and pain. When they were finished, they sent the remains back to Earth in the Endeavour, along with detailed scientific reports of their findings. The assembly chamber was absolutely silent. Several delegates had recoiled from their positions. The Churik's ambassador had gone completely still, a sign of extreme shock in her species. The Delphin's water sphere had darkened to a murky gray. Even the Lumine delegate had dimmed her energy field. That incident is not in Concordance records, Velrin said quietly. Why would we know about the Zeloth Empire? You would not, Torres said. Because humanity spent the next 40 years hunting down every single member of the Zeloth species and killing them. Every last one. We found their colonies, their outposts, their hidden refuges. We destroyed them all. The Zeloth Empire does not exist anymore, because humanity does not believe in second chances for those who torture our people. Counselor Thesa spoke from her water sphere, her translated voice trembling. Commander Torres, what you are describing is genocide. It is the most serious crime recognized by galactic law. Yes, Torres agreed. It is. And we would do it again, under the same circumstances. That is what you need to understand about humanity. We do not forgive certain things. We do not forget. And we will pursue vengeance across decades if necessary. He paused, then added, but we did not come here to talk about the Zeloth. We came here to explain why we behave the way we do, why we cannot simply trust in your good intentions, and your diplomatic protocols. Torres changed the holographic display again. Now it showed a timeline, a visual representation of humanity's brief history in space. After the Zeloth incident, humanity became very cautious about first contact. We spent decades developing better ships, better weapons, better defenses. We established protocols for encountering new species. We trained our people to be ready for anything. And then, 37 years ago, we met the Corthan Federation. The display showed another alien species, these ones appearing more similar to the Korvathi than Torres might have liked. Valoran shifted uncomfortably on his platform. The Corthan seemed different from the Zeloth. They were diplomatic, respectful, careful not to make any aggressive moves. They offered trade agreements instead of demanding visits to their home worlds. They shared some technology, but not too much, not too fast. They seemed to understand that humanity was traumatized and needed time to build trust. For 5 years, relations between humanity and the Corthan Federation were positive, productive, peaceful. Torres's voice took on a bitter edge. And then we discovered that the entire time, the Corthan had been slowly poisoning every food product they sold us. Nothing immediately lethal, just compounds that would accumulate in human tissues over time, causing neurological damage, reduced fertility, and eventually systemic organ failure. They were trying to weaken us before they invaded. How did you discover this? Valoran asked, though part of him did not want to know the answer. One of our scientists happened to run an unrelated experiment that detected the compounds. Pure chance. If she had not been testing for something completely different, we would not have found out until it was too late. We had already consumed enough of their products that 12% of our population was showing early symptoms. Torres let that sink in. The Corthan Federation no longer exists either, he said simply. We made sure of that. Commander Torres walked slowly around the human platform, and Valoran noticed that every human in the delegation was watching the other delegates closely, monitoring their reactions. This is why we came here in cargo ships instead of diplomatic yachts. This is why we brought 63 people instead of 20. This is why we have weapons and security teams and enough food for a month. Because in our experience, the galaxy is not a friendly place. Advanced civilizations with thousands of years of history have tried to destroy us not once, but twice. And those are just the 2 major incidents. There have been others. The holographic display began showing a series of images, each one depicting a different encounter between humanity and alien species. A trade mission that turned into a hostage situation. A cultural exchange that was actually cover for industrial espionage. A scientific collaboration that ended with human researchers being infected with experimental bioweapons. A rescue operation that was a trap designed to capture human vessels for study. Each incident was documented with dates, locations, and outcomes. Each one reinforced the same message. Humanity had learned through bitter experience that trust was dangerous. So when your ships appeared in orbit above our colonies 2 years ago, Torres said, his voice harder now, and demanded that we evacuate worlds where millions of humans lived. Worlds we had spent decades terraforming and building. You have to understand our perspective. We did not see diplomats enforcing ancient territorial laws. We saw another advanced civilization trying to take what was ours, and our history told us exactly where that would lead. Valoran felt compelled to respond. Commander, the Concordance is not like the species you encountered. We have maintained peace for 3,000 years. Our laws exist to prevent conflict, not to enable it. Torres smiled, and this time there was no warmth in it at all. Ambassador, you are asking us to trust in 3,000 years of your history when we have only 63 years of our own. You are asking us to believe that you are different from the Zeloth and the Corthan and all the others, based solely on your assurances. Can you understand why that is difficult for us? He gestured to the map still floating in the center of the chamber. You show us boundaries and territories, and tell us that these systems belong to the Concordance by ancient right. But we look at those same systems and see worlds that your member species surveyed and rejected. Worlds you considered too dangerous, too difficult, too expensive to colonize. We went to those worlds and made them livable through technology and determination, and the sacrifice of thousands of pioneers who died trying to terraform hostile environments. And now you want them back because you have decided they have value after all. Ambassador, Xric of the Churiks clicked angrily. You speak as if the Concordance has wronged you, but you are the aggressors. You expanded into territories that were not yours. You ignored our warnings and our legal claims. You started this war through your arrogance and ignorance. Did we? Torres asked quietly. Let me show you something else. The holographic display changed again, this time showing what appeared to be official concordance documents. These are survey reports from your own archives. They date back between 200 and 800 years. Every one of them describes systems that are now home to human colonies. And every one of them ends with the same conclusion. Unsuitable for colonization. Too hostile. Resources not worth the investment required. You abandoned these worlds, Ambassador. You left them empty and unclaimed except for some notes in your bureaucratic files. He pulled up another set of documents. These are the messages we sent to the Concordance when we first arrived in those systems. We announced our presence. We asked if anyone claimed these worlds. We waited for responses. In 16 cases, we received no answer at all. In 9 cases, we received automated messages acknowledging our inquiry and informing us that our communication had been filed for future reference. Not once did anyone tell us these systems were off limits until after we had invested years of effort and billions of credits into making them habitable. Valrin examined the documents, and his skin patterns flickered with uncomfortable recognition. The dates were accurate. The procedures Torres described matched concordance protocols. Humanity had, in fact, followed proper notification procedures. The problem was that those procedures were designed for established species that already understood the complex web of concordance territorial law, not for newcomers who took silence as permission. Commander Torres. Valrin said carefully, I believe there may have been a misunderstanding. Our territorial protocols assume that species conducting surveys understand the difference between active claims and archival claims. The systems you colonized were classified as archival claims, meaning they remain concordance territory even if they are not actively occupied. This is standard practice that prevents conflicts over. Torres interrupted him. Ambassador, with respect, that is insane. You cannot claim territory you are not using, have no intention of using, and did not bother to tell anyone was claimed. That is not law. That is just powerful civilizations declaring that everything belongs to them until they decide otherwise. The human commander walked back to the center of his platform. Let me tell you what humanity learned in 63 years of contact with galactic civilization. We learned that advanced species lie. They lie about their intentions, their capabilities, their histories. We learned that diplomatic language is often used to hide aggressive intent. We learned that treaties are only valuable if both parties have the power to enforce them. And we learned that when you are a young species with limited resources, everyone assumes they can take advantage of you because you do not know any better. He looked directly at Valrin. So yes, we came to this peace summit in cargo ships full of people and weapons and supplies. We came prepared for this to be another trap, another betrayal, another painful lesson about how the galaxy really works. But we came. Despite everything, despite our history and our trauma and our very reasonable paranoia, we came. Do you understand how much courage that took? The assembly chamber was silent, except for the soft hum of life support systems. Valrin looked around at the other delegates and saw his own discomfort reflected in their postures and expressions. They had all assumed that humanity was aggressive because humans were primitive and violent. They had not considered that humanity might be aggressive because they had learned to be because their brief history in space had taught them that aggression was the only language that kept them alive. Captain Vasquez stepped forward to stand beside Torres. She held up a small device that projected another holographic display. "This is a human child," she said. The image showed a young human, perhaps 10 years old by their developmental standards, sitting in what appeared to be a classroom. Her name was Maya Chun. She lived on New Horizon, one of the colonies you demanded we evacuate. She was studying xenobiology because she dreamed of meeting alien species and learning about their cultures. She wanted to be a bridge between humanity and the rest of the galaxy. The image changed, showing the same child, but older now, perhaps 16 or 17. "This is Maya after the attack on New Horizon. Your forces bombed the colony when we refused to evacuate. Maya survived, but her school did not. Neither did 237 other children who were in their classes that day." Vasquez's voice remained steady, but Velrun could see the tension in her jaw, the carefully controlled anger in her eyes. "Maya does not study xenobiology anymore. She trains as a combat pilot. She wants to make sure no one ever bombs another school full of children. And there are thousands of Mayas across human space. Children who lost their innocence because this war taught them that the galaxy is not interested in their dreams, only in their compliance." Torres took over again. "We are not here to make you feel guilty. Guilt accomplishes nothing. We are here because we need you to understand that humanity will never simply trust in your good intentions. We will always verify. We will always prepare for the worst. We will always protect our own, because our experience has taught us that no one else will. But," and he emphasized the word strongly, "that does not mean we cannot work together. It just means you need to accept that humanity does things differently. We do not follow your protocols, because we do not trust that those protocols will protect us. We bring weapons to peace summits because we have learned that peace is only possible between parties that respect each other's strength. We question your laws and your claims because we have seen how laws can be used to justify almost anything." He walked to the very edge of the human platform, as close as he could get to the other delegates without leaving his defensive position. "But despite all of that, despite our suspicion and our caution and our weapons, we want peace. We want to find a way to coexist with the concordance. We want our children to study xenobiology instead of combat tactics. We want to build instead of destroy. We just need you to meet us halfway. We need you to acknowledge that our concerns are valid, that our experiences matter, that being a young species does not mean we deserve less respect or consideration than civilizations that have existed for thousands of years." Velrun stood slowly, his forearms moving in a gesture of deep thought. "Commander Torres, Captain Vasquez, members of the human delegation, I think I speak for the entire concordance when I say that we have never heard a presentation quite like this one. You have given us much to consider. The Zeloth and Korthan incidents were not in our records because those species existed outside concordance space. We did not know about them, did not know what humanity had experienced before encountering us. Perhaps if we had known, we would have approached your species differently." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "You accused us of wrongdoing, and you are not entirely incorrect. Our territorial protocols are designed for species that have been integrated into concordant society for generations. We did not consider that they might be confusing or unfair to newcomers. Our response to your colonization efforts was based on law, but we did not stop to ask whether that law was just in these circumstances. And our military operations," he felt his skin patterns shift to show shame, "were conducted without sufficient consideration for civilian casualties. The attack on New Horizon should never have happened. Those children should never have died. That failure cannot be undone, but it can be acknowledged." He looked around the chamber at the other delegates. Many were nodding, There are various forms of body language indicating agreement. Even Ambassador Xric, who had been so hostile earlier, had softened her posture slightly. "I propose that we suspend the formal negotiation framework," Valoran continued. "Instead, let us have a real conversation. Not as representatives of ancient civilizations and upstart newcomers, but as intelligent beings trying to find a way to share a galaxy that is large enough for all of us. Let us discuss not what the law says, but what is fair. Not what has always been done, but what should be done. And let us start by acknowledging that humanity has legitimate grievances and legitimate fears based on their experiences." Commander Torres exchanged glances with his team. For a moment, the humans had a rapid, quiet conversation in their own language. Then Torres turned back to face the assembly. "Ambassador Valoran, we accept your proposal. But we need one thing to be clear from the start. We will not give up the colonies. Those worlds are home to millions of humans who have invested their lives in building something there. They are not bargaining chips. They are not up for negotiation. Any peace agreement that requires us to abandon those people is no peace at all. What if we recognized human sovereignty over the colonized worlds?" Elder Zemer of the Peaceful Collective suggested, his tentacles moving in thoughtful patterns. "In exchange for humanity agreeing to submit all future expansion plans to Concordance review? Not approval, mind you, but review. A chance for dialogue before actions that might cause conflict." Torres considered this. What would such a review process look like? Would it be a rubber stamp, or would you actually listen to our reasoning? Would you consider our needs and our perspective, or would you just tell us to follow the ancient laws? It would be genuine dialogue, Valoran promised. And it would work both ways. Humanity would learn about Concordance concerns and territorial sensitivities. The Concordance would learn about human requirements and expansion pressures. Decisions would be made together, not imposed by one side on the other. And he added, perhaps it is time for the Concordance to review its own territorial policies. If we are claiming systems we have no intention of using, systems that could be home to billions of people if properly developed, perhaps those claims are not as legitimate as we have always assumed. The negotiations continued for 3 more days, but they were nothing like the formal, protocol-driven discussions that typically characterized Concordance diplomacy. Instead, they were messy, emotional, sometimes frustrating conversations between species, trying to understand each other across vast gulfs of history and experience. The humans remained on their fortified platform, and no one asked them to leave their defensive position. The other delegates came to understand that this was simply how humans operated, and that their caution was not an insult, but a survival mechanism. By the end of the 3rd day, they had reached an agreement. Human sovereignty over the 17 colonized systems would be recognized. In exchange, humanity would join the Concordance as a full member species with the rights and responsibilities that entailed. Future expansion would be coordinated through a new joint committee that included both human and Concordance representatives. And perhaps most importantly, the Concordance would establish a new protocol for integrating young spacefaring species, one that accounted for the fact that newcomers might not understand the complex web of ancient laws and customs that governed galactic civilization. As the delegates prepared to depart, Valoran approached the human platform one final time. "Commander Torres, I wanted to thank you personally for your honesty. It would have been easier for you to simply accept our initial framework and negotiate within its bounds. Instead, you forced us to confront uncomfortable truths about ourselves and our civilization. That took courage." Torres smiled, and this time the expression reached his eyes. "Ambassador, in human culture, we have a saying. Trust is earned, not given. You earned our trust by listening when you could have dismissed us, by acknowledging your mistakes when you could have defended them, by treating us as equals when you could have treated us as children who needed to be educated. That matters more than you know. Valerin felt his skin patterns shift through colors that expressed gratitude and respect. Perhaps humanity will teach the Concordance to be better than we have been. We could use that lesson. As the human delegation prepared to return to their ships, Captain Vasquez approached Valerin with something in her hand. "Ambassador," she said, "I wanted you to have this." It was a small holographic projector. When Valerin activated it, he saw the image of Maya Chun, the child who had survived the attack on New Horizon. But this was a new recording. Maya was older now, and she was smiling. "I heard we made peace," she said in the recording. "I heard that maybe things will be different now. I think I might go back to studying xenobiology after all. There is so much I want to learn." Valerin looked at Vasquez, and he saw in her eyes the same hope that was in the young human's voice. "This is what we are fighting for," Vasquez said quietly. "Not territory, not resources, not pride. We are fighting so that our children can have the childhood they deserve. We are fighting so that Maya and millions like her can dream again instead of preparing for war. That is worth any sacrifice, worth any risk, worth even trusting species we have every reason to fear." The human ships departed from the assembly hall with the same lack of ceremony that had marked their arrival. They simply activated their engines and disappeared into hyperspace, leaving behind a galaxy that had learned something important. Humanity had come to the Peace Summit and accidentally terrified everyone, not because they were monsters, but because they were survivors who had learned to trust nothing and prepare for everything. They had shown the Concordance a mirror, and the reflection had not been comfortable. But from that discomfort, from that honest confrontation with difficult truths, something new had emerged. Not just peace, but understanding. Not just a treaty, but the beginning of a real relationship built on mutual respect rather than ancient hierarchies. Valerin stood at the observation window, watching the space where the human ships had been, and he thought about all the species in the galaxy who had approached humanity with lies, with hidden agendas, with the assumption that a young species could be exploited. Those species had created the very threat they now feared. They had taught humanity to be suspicious, aggressive, and relentlessly focused on survival. But they had also, inadvertently, created a species that valued honesty above diplomacy, that preferred uncomfortable truths over comfortable lies, and that would always fight for their children's right to dream. The Concordance had wanted humanity to join galactic civilization and learn to follow the established rules. Instead, humanity had joined galactic civilization and immediately started questioning whether those rules were worth following. And perhaps, Valerin thought, that was exactly what the galaxy needed. A species that had not forgotten how to fight, how to adapt, how to survive against impossible odds. A species that came to peace, summits armed and ready for war, but still hoping for something better. A species that terrified everyone, but might also, in time, save them all. The assembly hall returned to its eternal silence, floating in the void between stars. But the echoes of what had happened, they would resonate across the galaxy for generations to come. Humanity had arrived at the Peace Summit, and nothing would ever be quite the same again. Asterisk.